You know what time it is. You know what's bound for our species. Space is something that we need to absolutely conquer. Look, I love Earth. It's a great place to ball out. However, all it takes is for one asteroid to just happen by, one gamma ray burst, one weird virus that snaps our genetic coding in half, and boom, humanity's over. So what's a hyper-intelligent, anxiety-ridden species to do to rectify this issue? At minimum, for at least the near future, let's become a multi-planet species within our own solar system. The concept has been around for quite a while, pretty much since the drop of when we found other planets. Get off Earth and colonize the immediate area. How, though, could this be accomplished? Well, while not entirely the correct way to do it, Red Planet has some relatively foundational thinking. As Earth is not doing so hot because of the toxicity in our air due to our own industrialization, it would become apparent that we really need to start kind of making money moves on the planet next door, known as Mars, because Venus is going to be way harder to terraform. As we would fire nukes to melt the poles and send over algae to begin, kind of altering the atmosphere, the terraforming would officially begin. However, the issue is we don't know what is really over there as of right now. As a crew would be sent out to kind of see how the terraforming was going because lower oxygen levels were being detected, they would be struck by a solar flare and isolated on the surface. So what would become more alarming is that the native life would appear to be somewhat aggressive. So in today's episode, let's discuss what these creatures are as well as what it would take to actually terraform Mars effectively and why it's going to be a difficult thing to do apart from just atmospheric alterations. We kick off today's story with Earth. It is the year 2000. Apparently, we have overpopulated and poisoned the planet faster than we could really clean it up. Ah, yes, those microplastics which are definitely being stored in your balls right now. We ignored it, and by 2025, we searched for a new planet, that being Mars. Well, it's 2026 now, and we are still arguing about whether we should even put a base on Luna, so it's not going well. We kept sending algae to Mars to terraform it, but then oxygen levels began to drop, which we don't know why. And even later, it's still not going to make a lot of sense if I'm being completely honest with you. We would end up then building a ship out in space, which I think that's the whole point of SpaceX and the reusable thrusters that we're kind of using. Basically, if we want to go to space in any long-term capacity, we need larger ships and better shielding, which is going to have to be built out in space. Of course, there is a question. Why wouldn't we just clean up the planet with the same money? Because government. That should about clarify that entire point. For every dollar spent, someone gets $1 trillion. Quick maths. The first manned mission to Mars is being prepped. Trinity is being sent out there with a bunch of others, including 90 sunglasses over here, as well as other people whose names don't really matter because I make it up as I go along. Being blasted off, everyone then runs their checks and systems, and they can't believe they're finally going. It's day 93, and they're only halfway there. Earth is gone as they can't see it anymore, which is a little bit anxiety-inducing, inducing, just a pale blue dot in the distance of a beam of light. Basically, the issue is possibly in 100 years, if the planet gets too poisoned, then everyone is gone. Not our timeline, but their timeline. You got some on the ship who are part of the Gauss Squad, and others who are not. Also, we have created machines, this is real life, that can pull around 40,000 tons of CO2 out of the air currently, every year. It's more of a proof of concept, but seeing as there is a reality that we can build these things, I read the reason that we aren't building them more often is because it'll allegedly give humanity a free pass to keep using fossil fuels. Look, whatever your view on it, I get it. We should definitely keep home base clean, but for now, it's sort of a necessary evil until we develop better energy sources. I mean, nuclear at minimum is a fantastic it's a great source of energy. Wind is great, but birds get cut in half, and solar has its own pollutions that it produces and the fact that we're producing it. So does nuclear, but it's a lot better. And then if we can finally figure out fusion, which at any given time from the 70s up until now, we were only 10 years away from figuring out fusion. Anyways, this timeline, why not build these to just pull the CO2 out of the air in the meantime? Oh yeah, politics. Of course, how tiresome.
Hey, look, buddy. I'm an engineer. That means I solve problems.
So Trinity then informs one of the scientists that he has to talk to some fourth graders later on, which he's not happy about. And then we get the customary shower scene as Bro then walks in, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't see you." And she's like, "Well, just pretend I'm your sister." What the f***? So he walks out, walking awkwardly, as funnily enough, everyone here is said to be a jock. Not enough nerds here, I feel like. Real scientists don't have square jaws. I've worked with them, and believe it or not, I was the most built. Then again, I approached it with take care of your meat suit as well as your brain case. Speaking of, checking on the suits, they get the drone dog thing out, which surely won't turn into a killbot later, ready to rock, as then they see through its vision. Turning on to military mode, he then tells it to take out the other guy as it leaves a mark on him, gutting him like a fish if it was actually a knife. No way this could ever go wrong. Why did you bring that on a science team mission? Meanwhile, on the party side of the ship, the temp is 10 degrees above normal, as it's found that they are fermenting someone. Frat bro over here says they are using it for sterilization, but it's really moonshine. Trinity then asks if the establishment serves women, as then she takes a shot. I mean, I suppose this thing is on autopilot, and as long as they don't run into like space debris, they should be good to go, which, I mean, if you do run into space debris, what are you really going to be able to do anyways? Like, there's not proper shielding. Like, there's not kinetic barriers, is what I'm saying on this ship. Which is, if we want to go out into space, like, full on, we may have to develop those. But they begin talking about God, as Birchinol here then says, to hell with humanity, just take Mars. So it's treason then. Also, bro over here totally botches the flirting as he says, well, I would be king. As Trinity then asks, well, what about her? As he says as sweatily as possible, well, excuse me, let me try this again. Well, you would be my queen, propagation of the species. That's how he sounds in my head. Anyways, that's the effects of moonshine right there. Also, women love it when you're sweating bullets while trying to flirt with them. They think it's endearing. Also, this would never work. If I recall, you need 11 men and 22 women in order to properly have enough genetic diversity to restart humanity. And even then, you need to be very careful with the pairings and control for a few generations as far as like who interacts with who to avoid inbreeding. And you better hope nobody has got a thing for their first cousins. And along with that, I mean, I think there were like 1,200 humans left, like, what was it, like 10,000 years ago or something? There was some sort of cataclysm, and that's why you have doppelgangers running around everywhere in life, because the genetic diversity got bottlenecked in humanity. We still don't necessarily know what it was. A lot of people think it was just climate change, and Africa wasn't doing so hot back then, and a bunch of other places were dealing with really catastrophic weather. But yeah, there was like 1,200 of us at one point, so we almost went extinct. Anyway, so Trinity gets up to leave, as he says it was just a joke. Yeah, man, awkward AF. Nice going. They have now made it to Mars, as 90s glasses vibes over here. Just kind of hangs out, as for some reason, Philosophic Man is just looking like a villain. As they initiate pre-launch checks, Mars is looking a little red if all that algae is actually there. They're heading to a HAB, as they call it, as they get hit with a gamma burst, as they say. It wasn't a gamma burst, but a solar flare has hit them, as radiation then starts radiating all over the ship and blowing up everything somehow. Like, these guys, they really weren't prepared for this. Like, seriously, this ship, with all of mankind's weight thrown behind it, wasn't prepared for a solar flare. The ship is, like, totally boned if they only have, like, you were going to be in space for so long. Okay, seriously, when you are leaving Earth and going to Mars, it's not like you should expect a solar flare, but it's also like you should not expect a solar flare. You could have put shielding behind this thing, even if it was just metal, and it would have helped out tremendously. I don't know, it just seems a little stupid to me. But all primary systems are going to go offline after about 6 minutes. Super neato on that, guys. So putting on the suits and getting ready to hell dive, the auto launch is initiated as launch system is not responding. The computer apologizes, which is a little weird, but Trinity says, well, I'm gonna have to do this manually. Pulling the lever Kronk, she manually releases them as they blast down to the surface, leaving her up there to deal with things on her own. Which, now that brings up the question, there aren't two of these things? These things are built on, like, ships need to be built on redundancies for this exact reason. Why would you put all of your hopes and prayers into one launch pod? Bit strange, isn't it? Going to the manual flight, they then enter Mars' atmosphere as the primary systems are all shut down. Artificial gravity then goes out as an electrical fire is now fully inflaming the ship. Well, this is going swimmingly. Trinity then goes to put out the fire, but gets blasted back as the chutes are deployed on the launch pod, which the atmosphere is pretty thin on Mars. I really don't know if these parachutes are going to catch enough air to slow this thing down properly, if I'm being honest, but deploying the bags on it, Trinity then goes for her suit, running out of juice as the pod then hits some rocks and then rolls horrifically. Bro, talk about an absolute puke fest in this thing. It finally comes to a stop as Trinity is still in the ship, dealing with her own issues. Getting to another pod, she then opens the door and extinguishes the fire in the ship. Closing the door, she has survived the entire ordeal. Meanwhile, on Mars, well, this looks like crap. Stepping out onto the surface, congratulations, you are the first human to step on Mars. And likely, you will also be the first human to get flatlined on Mars too. Ugh. So everyone gets out with surprisingly no puke in their visors. Trinity then continues working to get the electricity working again. Restoring the main power source, the ship then restarts as the atmosphere is slowly restored. Yeah, I guess it was a bit hasty blasting off into the surface, wasn't it? So as the squad then argues about where they're supposed to go, they know they're either 60 kilometers or 120 kilometers away, which I believe is like 36 miles or like 78 miles or something like that in the Lord's units. Honestly, I don't really... So, here's the thing with metric. Who looked at a mile? Who looked at 1 mile and said, yeah, you know what? This is 1.6 kilometers. Inquiring minds wish to know. Anyway, so that's the mission, and it's totally failing. They're using some sort of distance measurement that nobody even uses to kind of figure out where they are, which... kilometers! So now likely they're going to need nutrition when they get there, so I hope they packed today's sponsor. You there, are you ready to eat fresh, never frozen meals delivered directly to your door? Well, you're in luck then. Factor does exactly just this, delivering the aforementioned fresh, never frozen meals, but also dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes after being put in the microwave. Spring is coming up, bro and broette. It's cold now, but it won't be long before we are all by the pool. Making the meal prep the focal point now, by spring, you'll be ready to head out into the sun and look swole. Nutrition is foundational to your gains. I, for one, love the protein option, like double protein that Factor offers. These are protein-heavy meals, so my list can continue to trend in the correct direction as I get stronger. They also offer keto, vegan, veggie, and calorie-smart options to aid you in your goals. Plus, with their 100 rotating weekly meal options and 2 times more seafood and protein options, there is something for everyone. So if you're ready to take your nutrition seriously, then head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code Roanoke FB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code Roanoke FB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. All right, let's get back to it. So checking the map, it appears pretty bad. 90s Glasses here is able to surmise where they are looking at that map in the rocks as a philosopher talks about how the universe could be made by God as he draws, a circle around a rock on the ground. He tells the squad he's going to be staying there. His spleen has ruptured. Wait, his spleen ruptured? What? And he's just chilling? Excuse me? You know how painful this would be? All right, so assuming the landing was pretty rough, I get that. But they should have been strapped in pretty well as far as we know. Master Chief also wasn't bouncing around the cabin like he was when he crash landed on Halo. So then how did his spleen rupture? Really, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, some people are like, well, no, the Mjolnir armor when he was holding on was stronger than a seatbelt. Interesting concept. So when he was knocked unconscious, did his suit still hold on? Because probably not, because you weren't in the same spot you were earlier. Master Chief definitely was bouncing around and killed those Marines. Throwing it out there. So anyways, of course, the other side of that is none of those seatbelts would have even contained him anyways, because he's over 1,000 pounds. So anyways, they decide to leave him behind as he says he's got to see Mars, and you know what? This is good enough, I suppose. Interesting. Everyone now then just heads off, and then there were 4. Trinity gets the comms back up, and she calls out to the ground crew, but nobody can hear her, which is a bit strange. The craft they arrived in would most definitely have a freaking radio in it. There's no shot it wouldn't. Plus, their suits should be able to receive signals from the ship overhead, even using the Hellpod as a signal booster. Seems very odd that they have this many layers of communication broken and only one Hellpod to jump it. Meanwhile, as they walk, they are finding no traces of any algae anywhere. It's supposed to be there, and there are no traces. They begin to suspect that maybe never anything actually was in this valley to begin with. Everyone is told to move out as they are upset there is no oxygen here. Meanwhile, the monkey bot from earlier has exited the craft. Firing off a drone, the ship overhead then looks for them and where they may have gone down below. So why doesn't the monkey dog have a radio on it? It's just, okay, here's the thing, right? When you're young, and I know, it's sort of like you just assume everything's going to turn out correctly, so you don't plan accordingly or do things you kind of take bigger risks. But it's as you get older, you start learning, hey, you know what? Systems fail, so we build redundancies for those systems, and that's what keeps you protected. Now get a group of adults in their 60s putting all this crap together who should know about redundancies, and then them be no, everything's gonna go perfectly fine to begin with. There's gonna be no solar flares. There's gonna be no reason anybody needs to go down to the surface. The ships don't need to be able to communicate with anybody on the ground. It's just what are you people thinking? Also, was the ship supposed to just stay up top while all of them went below? Onto the surface? Anyways, I'm complaining too much. But anyways, as everyone continues their nice jaunt, Frat Bro then grabs a rock as Trinity finally finds them and sees that the philosopher is donezo. Looking out, they finally find the hab, as Trinity also looks at the hab and sees it's totally destroyed. Okay, so this is obviously not an ideal situation, but we're about to see something really stupid. So they're at the hab, and then she sees the hab is destroyed, right? So that means they are in that immediate area. And I'm talking with the camera she has, she can see detail. How does she not see them? So anyways, any food that was left over would probably be freeze-dried at least, so there's that. But their main plan now was to look for O2 canisters. Trinity then calls back to Earth, and Hab 1 has been totally destroyed, and she's not even sure if the team is alive, but she knows that without that, they will not survive down there. Meanwhile, there is no food. Meanwhile, she could have looked 14 feet to the left and seen them, but there's also no air and no water available to them. So, mission boned. Snake! Trinity then cuts her hand and starts bleeding pretty good, as Frat Bro knows Trinity made it up above somehow. Reginald then starts saying he had a thing for Trinity from the start. What is it? A A barracks 5 is a field 10. She was the only woman on the ship. Anyway, so everyone is on borrowed time now as they start talking about how women back on Earth will miss them. Unlikely. Everyone's pretty screwed at this point as 90's Glasses then comes up to tell Hardass over here he forgives him for just being a hardass, I guess, as he says, you know what? I don't need your forgiveness. So then 90's Glasses just kind of smacks him on the back, which then accidentally pushes him off a cliff, which sends him careening to his end. I mean, crap, man, that sucks. I mean, it is stated that you could probably survive a fall on Mars from about even up to 120 feet up due to the lower gravity, but I have no clue how large that cliff is. He may have survived that. Anyways, back over at Birchnell and Frat Bro, he's told now, well, they used the nukes to melt the caps, and when it was hot enough, they then sent down the algae. Birchnell then continues talking to him as he's talking through his fear of flatlining. They still don't know what happened to the algae, as 90's Glasses comes back to report Hardass actually jumped from the cliff, allegedly. Nobody will know if that's not what happened. Quit asking questions. So Frat Bro then asks how the hypoxia is going to feel. Birchnell doesn't sugarcoat. He's like, it's gonna hurt. Bummer, bro. Frat Bro then gets up as his oxygen begins to deplete. He says, screw this, as everyone watching him run out of air, as Birch is then told next to replace his oxygen. Frat Bro starts convulsing, which, watching this, knowing that's going to happen to you has got to be the worst feeling ever. In fact, actually, they say when your tissues start basically running out of oxygen, it is painful. Your anxiety spikes like you would not believe because you know you're dying, and your systems all go haywire. So, convulsions, that's on the table. Anyways, Frat Bro, as a last resort, opens his visor as he realizes that he actually can breathe. It's like being at high altitude, but it is there, which means now Hardass died for no reason. Way to go, 90's Glasses. Trinity is then informing NASA about the situation as they say they can get her back, but they will presume the mission to be failed to Mars. So her plan is to call back and ask them what she should do since the engines actually won't even ignite. And then there were 3 squad. Now they develop a plan, go to the rovers sent back a long time ago, and then use the radio from there. They ignite the HAB to stay warm for that evening as they determine they need to call back to Trinity, but they don't know if it'll even matter. Birch then tells 90's Glasses it must have been hard watching Hardass go out like that. Yeah, it was real difficult. I guess you could say it's really pushing me into depression. Yeah!
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So now Robot Monkey shows up as they check their systems to see if she's still Gucci. This activates her almonds to the 10th degree as she thinks she's damaged, so she starts going ham on everyone as Birch's ribs are then broken. The robot also won't respond to the override command. Of course, very good. Why do we even have the override command if it could just override it? So apparently this thing is playing war games now. Injure one to slow the group down. She could have just taken out everybody. I don't think they had a chance. She then blocks the signal from Frat Bro so that he can't see where she's at, which won't make sense later. But yeah, kill a robot on this mission was a fantastic thinking, guys. Good work. Everyone then takes their first pee on Mars as you get a really high arc and low gravity. Guys will know this and see this and say, hell yeah. Trinity then keeps trying to get the ship repaired enough to get home as she has the green light for the engine ignition. She says she's going to look for the crew once daylight hits. I mean, if you haven't confirmed they're gone yet, that's probably something you should have done. Getting to the rover sent long ago, they begin working to get its radio kind of functional once more. Trinity keeps looking to see anything but finds nothing. She looked all afternoon and didn't see anything, so obviously they are gone. Having done everything she can, searching through her coffee break, she then says she will start the return home. Pulling the radio, they keep trying as all get out to kind of call her, but she's not answering. It's been 2 hours now, nobody's listening. However, NASA hears them and calls out to Trinity. Frat Bro almost throws the radio for some reason, but then here's Trinity. Why you wouldn't go up higher, on a hill, see if you can get a little closer, is beyond me. But telling her that they can breathe, she says, that's impossible. Is it really though? Because they're breathing. Trinity then calls back to NASA and tells them 3 squad is still alive and they're still functional. Birchnell then says genetics is difficult and he's going to trust his PhDs over the idea of God. We all make choices in life. Can't say I do the same. Trinity then tells them they have only 19 hours to get to a rover and get the engines ignited. After that, she can't burn any more fuel as this will cause her to not be able to return back home either. Flashing back to Frat Bro and Trinity, they almost kiss, but then they decide not to. Meanwhile, Killbot continues to follow them, stuck in military mode. Cresting a hill, 90's Glasses says it looks like the ground is moving in the distance, which it is. Frat Bro is then told to go on a private channel as he's informed the return ship can only fit 2 people. And my response to that is maybe a little more lap sitting than normal, but it is totally possible. As they walk, a storm then begins moving in. A landicane on Mars, I suppose. It's the size of Montana, and they need to seek shelter immediately. The winds will reach 110 miles per hour, based units, and the temp will be negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the Lord's units. What is that in metric? Oh, man. Ooh, it's probably like, I don't know, negative 32 degrees Celsius or something. Or actually, and they're like a point. I think it's like -40 when -40 Celsius becomes -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't quote me on that. But 110 miles per hour. I don't know. 80. No, that's probably like 100 and maybe like 200 kilometers per hour, something around that range. I really should have looked that up, but I'm in the middle of recording and I just didn't want to look it up. Anyways, finding a small cave system, then jump in there, and then they close up the exit as the robot is still looking for them. But it's lost visual. But apparently, it can also look through rocks, finding them almost immediately. This is going to leave them about 4 hours to launch after this thing goes by, so okay. Anyway, so the killbot hunkers down so that it does not lose them. Frat Bro then informs the group only 2 of them can actually make it inside of this ship. He tells the other 2 to go, and you know what? I'll stay behind. Like, personally, he doesn't even think it's going to really launch because it's Russian. It'll get 10,000 feet off the ground and then explode, which is hilarious. 90's Glasses then asks if they really trust him, as Birchnell then tells him, I don't trust any of you guys as a joke, but 90's Glasses is making it super awkward for no reason. Look, bro, that blood on your hands is your fault. Alright, stop including others. It's projection. NASA now calls out to Trinity as she's informed they couldn't have survived that storm, and if she has not been contacted by them since she gets the signal, she's ordered to return home. I mean, that ship is pretty expensive. They probably want it back. Being woken up by water dropping, they realize 90's Glasses is making a run for the rover, having left them behind and taken the radio. This guy was told he already had one of the spots, and then he decides to leave them both to go alone. What a douchebag. As he's engaging in a nice jaunt, though, the killbot has found them. Somehow, Frat Bro can now see the camera footage because it's no longer blocked. How exactly? Well, that remains to be seen. As 90's Glasses then rests for a moment, he turns around and gets shredded by Killbot. They now both have to go and get the radio, but that definitely solves the issue of 2 people versus 3. As they continue their walk, well, there it is. The algae, absolutely covering the area. It's there, but nowhere else. Yes, but why? I don't know, honestly. Seeing a beam of light, they then find 90's Glasses stabbed, and he's bled out. Having a death grip on the radio, they then free it as a bug then exits out of his visor as they begin cutting into it. The native life starts going absolutely ham as the nematodes are feeding on the algae. Grabbing a few of them, Birchnell then gets it as nematodes eat algae. They make O2 as a byproduct. The algae itself should also be making O2. How does he come to this conclusion? Genuinely, I have no idea. As a biologist, there was nothing that indicates these things are making O2. Like, the oxygen levels dropping indicates maybe that they were eating the algae and producing carbon dioxide, which would make way more sense considering that's all that's left on Mars. But how does he know they're producing O2 as a byproduct? This was the biggest leap in logic I've ever seen. Anyways, approaching the fields of gold, it's everywhere. And now they have to walk in it as Birchnell then starts bleeding out of his mouth. As he bleeds, the nematodes then find him as they eat through his suit. I think there's already one that already ate through his suit and is inside of him, but lighting up a flare, all the algae in the area is ignited. Algae's not that flammable, dude. Like, I must have, you know what? I'm gonna go back in the science portion. I'm gonna look to see why it was so flammable, because algae itself is not flammable. Like, I get that it's producing O2, but I mean, yeah, it's not like gasoline covered. Like, that's what they make it to create a field of fire that is that quick at burning that you can see it from space. What is this stuff? Anyway, so Trinity then calls out as Frat Bro informs Trinity that everyone is gone except for him. Amping him up about how far he's come, she wants him to put on his big boy pants, stand up, and keep walking. Also, don't forget, Killbot is still in the area. Running, he begins hearing it overhead because it's circling him. And continuing his run, Trinity tells him to keep moving as he's almost there, but he's freaking out, saying, "Are you sure it's here?" Well, I mean, she has a bird's eye view, you don't. However, cresting a hill, he has found it. Pulling the sample tray out, he opens up the tray and then connects the radio to the ship. Luckily, the ship still works as it speaks Russian to him. Should be easy enough. The ignition is usually next to the altimeter on the Russian MiG, right? So getting the ship prepped, he then purges some of the fuel, I think, as something then flashes red, which doesn't look good. Oh, the battery is dead. But there's enough to give you that stupid little bear symbol thing. Anyways, there's not enough power to launch. Frat Bro realizes he's going to die on this planet. Possibly. They have 1 minute till blackout, and he won't be able to reach the ship. He informs Trinity about how the nematodes were at the hab and how the algae was creating oxygen, but so do the nematodes, apparently. Frat Bro then says he really hates this planet. Definitely come back with more equipment next time, as he tells her he will miss her. She doesn't say anything, as he's like, whoops, I guess I should have kissed you. And then they lose comms frequency. Nice. Hanging out in Depression Crater, Trinity then cries in the ship at bad times as the Killbot has made the scene. Realizing the battery from the Killbot could be used, he continues prepping the ship. How do you intend to stop this thing, by the way? Grabbing some wires, the Killbot then sees him, and then checking the camera, he can still see where it's at. Again, why is it no longer blocking the camera feed? Oh wait, there it goes. Alright then. So then he waits for Killbot as it's right above him. As he looks at it, it comes down, getting ready to poke him in the heart. It could have just stabbed him through the top of the head, but whatever. Instead, he detonates the chute, catching it on fire, which it's a robot, as it begins thrashing as it's contained, and I guess it's burned by the fire. Then going for it, the drone is still in the air as he pulls the battery out of that thing, and then it gets blown up by its own drone. Putting the battery in the craft, he then launches it and heads up into space. Luckily, the shielding is totally crap, as then he opens up the entire thing and then exits the atmosphere. Trinity now spots him as she aborts her launch and instead goes to pick him up, which I'm going to explain this right now. This is stupid. Seeing he's out there, she then seals the level as she's on and goes out to the dock to get him. So he is 43 kilometers away. That's almost 27 miles in the based Lord's units. So she launches out to go grab him, right? Not that big of a deal. Well, hitting that thing with way more force than she could survive kind of is the big deal. Like, no shot. She grabs this craft and then enters the dock. Okay, so let's figure this out real quick. That was 27 miles away. She got there inside of 30 seconds. That's literally about 3,240 miles per hour. That is twice the speed of a bullet. I think it's like actually like a rifle round or whatever. That's like twice that speed. I think it's like 1,600 miles per hour around there is usually what it does. But anyways, so twice the speed of a bullet, she hits that thing. That would impart roughly 62 megajoules into her body, or about 62 million newtons. So let me tell you, the brain would shear from your brainstem on impact, so she's dead. The organs would tear away from their anchors, so she's dead. The skeleton would be pulverized, so she's dead. She would essentially be liquefied on impact. She would be a bug on your windshield. In space, it doesn't look that fast, and that's kind of the problem, but acceleration alone in that time frame wouldn't be survivable. The G's were too high. The impact is hilariously deadly, like way overkill. And then getting back to the ship itself, you were basically flying back at 32,000 miles per hour. 3,200 miles per hour. Turning would do absolutely nothing. You just run into the metal and still liquefy on impact. I have no idea what they were thinking when they made him that far away. And why randomly, like, do you have 27 miles worth of cordage to even go get him? This whole part was so stupid. Like, oh, he's 400 feet away. That would make sense. Like, okay, well, I don't have to accelerate to some crazy speed. 27 miles away in 30 seconds? That's really fast. So anyways, sealing it up and restoring the atmosphere, she then takes off his helmet and pulls him out of the ship. Bro is straight up in cardiac arrest as she cuts through his suit and does the good old-fashioned CPR. And then, ooh, this is one you don't see often, the cardiac thump. It gets his heart going, which that should only be used in a complete last resort scenario. He has survived, and being brought back, he said he saw Elvis as they're now headed home. Alright, so the cardiac thump, you're probably interested about that, but it's a last resort because chest compressions actually keep the heart circulating the blood by compressing the heart, and then as it re-expands, it naturally draws in blood. So it's just keeping the whole system going. And it keeps the brain somewhat perfused to kind of stave off hypoxia. It's not a perfect scenario. You only get 20% of the oxygen usually do, but some oxygen is better than no oxygen. The chest compression also forces the lungs to push out some air, and then when they rebound, draw in fresh air. Now, if it's just not working and no help is coming, the cardiac thump, basically you can shock the heart back into rhythm from sheer trauma. Electrical activity has to be somewhat present, but the force coming down will actually cause a focused, sharp jolt that can start kind of helping it beating normally. You basically make a fist as hard as you possibly can, like squeeze the absolute hell out of your fist, and you gotta hit that thing as hard as you possibly can on the chest. Almost like you're trying to crack through that rib right above the heart. If you do that correctly, and you're very, very lucky, you might be able to restart the heart beating normally again. This is dubious at best, and if help is coming, just keep doing chest compressions. But if you're out in the wilderness, you just hit the absolute holy hell out of their chest. So anyways, departing the red planet, the nematodes are genetically mapped as apparently on Earth, they're calling Frat Bro a hero. Not Trinity, but Frat Bro, because he survived. So he also secured a rock from the planet, as then he kisses Trinity, making Neo very upset, as the mission was accomplished, allegedly. Not really sure how that was considered accomplished, but she then talks about how they have 6 months left to get home, but they learned a lot. Like what? What did you learn? What was there possibly anything that could be done? What knowledge are you bringing home? Oh, the algae was being eaten by nematodes. I guess we're bringing home, oh, we're not alone, but how does that help clean up the planet? You can't release those things down on Earth. They'll just eat everything. Anyway, so the planet's still totally screwed. The mission didn't go the way it was supposed to, but hey, mission accomplished. Now watch this drive. Thus concludes the Red Planet. All right, so we have, let me count real quick, about 14 problems here. Well, maybe a few more than that if I'm being completely honest with you. And it all starts with the fact that terraforming goes well beyond just fixing up an atmosphere and then calling it good enough. There are a multitude of factors that go into making a planet hospitable and safe for human habitation. And even past that point, you are talking about literal changes to the human physiology. So I think what we should probably do, and would be pretty fun, is explain the parameters of how difficult this is going to be and the biological constraints our own bodies put on us. Let me just say that we need parasites. The irony is so thick, you could cut it with a knife. And with that, let's start from the beginning. What is wrong with Mars, or really the planets around us? Roughly 700 million years ago, things were different in our solar system. Earth was still quite habitable in this time frame, although you may not like what you would find. But there is a possibility that there were 2 other habitable planets in the near vicinity of us. Could you imagine how much further along we would be in the space exploration phase if humanity would have known that there were planets at least just at our doorstep that we could step on and, not instantly bite the dust? Talk about an absolutely busted timeline that we live in. Now again, this is all hypothesized, so don't take this as a bona fide fact, but there are, or at least there were considered to be, about 2 planets that were good to go, and this was Venus and Mars. Around this time frame, the sun was about 94 to 95% the luminosity that it is today, which sounds good enough, but the other side of that coin is Earth was just barely coming out of the snowball Earth phase, where it was incredibly emo, edgy, and cold. What happened, it's kind of a runaway effect. Like take Venus, for instance, with its runaway effect. Earth was kind of going through a similar thing, except with cold. As more snow fell, what would end up happening is it reflected more of the sun's sunlight away from Earth instead of heating it up. So that would make more snowfall, and it kind of kept doing that until it's kind of hypothesized that there may have just been like water around the equator pretty much, and everywhere else was just covered with a giant glacier. Interestingly, it may be that Venus around this time frame was entirely habitable. Venus, for all intents and purposes, got totally hosed. While we know there's enough water in its atmosphere to produce a global ocean a few feet deep at this point, it's likely it wouldn't have been global, and it really just would have been confined to a few areas, sort of like Earth. It doesn't have just a global ocean. However, the issue is something happened with Venus, probably from getting absolutely smacked by something which sent it into a retrograde revolution around its axis. This clearly caused some issues for it. 700 million years ago, it would have been likely, essentially it's just a hot tropical planet based on what we find. Possibly enough water there capable of supporting human life, albeit it would be warm as all get out, but Venus sat right on the warmer side of the Goldilocks zone, and it still sort of does. The issue, however, is that with the lower water amounts, which actually lubricate the crust, allowing for tectonic plates to move and then subduct, Venus got stuck. The surface would be locked in, and a repaving event would continue to take place as massive amounts of sulfur and CO2 were outgassed into the atmosphere, creating a runaway greenhouse. As this happened, the planet would get warmer and warmer, and considering it is near the actual sun, as close as it is, at least even with it being lower luminosity 700 million years ago, this still created the hellish planet that is actually the hottest in the solar system, even hotter than Mercury. If we could find a way to actually cool the planet off effectively by restructuring its atmosphere the way that we would need it, it would still present an issue for us because the magnetic field around the planet is not so much global, but localized and weak. This is what's known as a induced magnetic field, and it is created when solar wind from the sun smashes into the upper atmosphere of Venus. See, the problem is the core simply spins too slowly to create a global magnetic field, and also we aren't even really sure if there's enough iron in its core to create a strong magnetic field, and given that it's close to the sun, you might want those. But this is rather important, as this means a lot of radiation from the sun actually slips through, and along with this, the atmosphere is being slowly siphoned off of the planet, but replaced constantly by the internal volcanism. So, potentially, there was more water back in the day, it's just been blasted off into space due to hydrogen escaping. It's actually pretty tragic if you think about it. But then you have the absolutely goated planet of Earth, truly a masterpiece. We should probably just make sure we terraform this planet correctly before we go off and try to fix other planets. The idea can be likened to literally not working on your daily driver. You have to change the oil, make sure the coolant system is working properly, and check the trans fluid. Keep that thing working because it keeps you moving properly, and then maybe we can go pick up a 3rd gen Forerunner that catastrophically needs a ton of work, or in this case, Mars. Venus is kind of just a Ford Pinto in the distance that's completely engulfed in flames. Sure, I guess you could fix it after it's done being on fire, but why would you even want to? And this brings us around to Mars, which is a bit of a kind of a same issue, except sort of more of an issue than we might imagine than Venus is. The prevailing thought on terraforming this world is simple, right? It's not too hot, maybe a little cold, but that's not a huge deal, just put on a blanket. First and foremost, the atmosphere of Mars currently is about 0.6% of what Earth's is. So, as you might imagine, the air is a little thin over there. It is 95% CO2, 2.7% nitrogen, and 1.6% argon with trace oxygen and water vapor. Again, 700 million years ago, it was hypothesized that water was quite regularly flowing on Mars because we even see the canals now. God, who was it? Not Archimedes. Galileo? Possibly Galileo. Is this all running off memory? I can look it up, and I probably should have. But anyways, the whole reason that we saw, or they saw actually, these canals on Mars, and we thought there was flowing water there, at least back in the day. Now we know there is none. But obviously, this means it must have been a little warmer back then. But around the equator currently, it gets up to around 68 degrees. In the future space units known as Fahrenheit, that's around 20 degrees Celsius in the cringe one planet species measurement system that nobody uses. So it doesn't sound bad as long as you are on the equator during the summer. The issue is, much like the deserts here on Earth, it gets cold at night, like really cold, around negative 130 degrees Fahrenheit or around negative 90 degrees Celsius. And this is because the atmosphere is incredibly thin, so it cannot retain heat, sort of like how Venus has the opposite issue. So what are we to do really? Well, honestly, this is the easy part. Realistically, all we would have to do is nudge a few large asteroids out of orbit, aim them at the poles, and then melt the massive amount of CO2 and water trapped at the poles, and obviously the CO2 will sublimate. But even then, if you melted everything, the estimates only put that around 15 millibars of pressure, which is over double what it is now. However, Earth sits at 1,000 millibars. What's also tragic about this planet is the same problem that Venus has. It is likely at some point in the past, based on what we find, Mars actually did have a magnetic field. It's been similar to the speed of Earth, however, it had less iron in its core. As a result of this, over time, it began to weaken. However, 700 million years ago, it had protection and a much thicker atmosphere that retained heat, and it also allowed for flowing water. 15 millibars, though, is not enough. This means something had to happen. As time passed, the magnetic field got weaker and weaker until it does what it always does, which it'll do on Earth too, and it's going to flip. During one of these events, it's hypothesized that possibly a solar flare happened during this flip on an already weak magnetic field. The atmosphere would then be catastrophically ripped from the planet. There were only really so many replacements for gases, and in the last 700 million years, the atmosphere has been continually stripped. The magnetic field has pretty much just evaporated entirely, so we have a bit of a problem here. And furthermore, there is another glaring issue. Yes, we nuked the poles and Red Planet, which would have doubled the atmosphere, but there's kind of just prevailing issues, I guess, for terraforming this entire world. First, it's still really cold, like too cold for proper algae growth. Along with this, where is the algae getting the water from to survive? It's not really in the atmosphere, and coupled with all of this, there isn't really all that much accessible CO2 to have carbon stripped away to create this oxygen. That's how this whole process is supposed to work, at least on our world. Plants and microbes take in CO2, they strip the carbon, and then release the O2 as a waste byproduct. The carbon is then used with water and then energy from the sun to create glucose so the plant can survive. However, if there is not enough CO2, this is like high altitude for a planet. There is simply not enough of the air around this plant to survive, or even the microbes that could be there. Now, a potential way around this is to do what happened to Earth. Way back in the day, you had Earth existing in basically what was a shooting gallery. During the bombardment period, as it's known, hundreds of meteorites, which are called meteorites because they have the right stuff to make it to the ground, and asteroids would impact the planet constantly. Also, whatever was the Mars-sized object that ran into Earth that created Luna, kind of a goated situation because that is also what helps make Earth habitable, but smaller objects were around like 52 strikes a day, as it's hypothesized. 16-mile impact craters, like what are considered to be world-ending, were also somewhat common, more so, not like every day, but around every 15,000 years, as opposed to like the 100 million years now. And this did several things to the planet. First, a ton of water was added to Earth. Also, other gases were hitting and being absorbed by the mantle. Essentially, Earth was appearing to be kind of like sort of the area of a map that you would see that receives the heaviest amount of snow, whereas Venus and Mars appear to have gotten only what could be considered a dusting. Now, we could in theory do the same thing as back then, get a few massive asteroids and then send them towards Mars. Of course, this has consequences. First, to terraform it properly, this is going to take several of these, so the logistics of how to even do this is going to require technology that we just don't have currently. Along with this, we need to survey the asteroids to determine what they're even made of. We would need iron, water, probably other gases. Nitrogen is important. The iron really needs to get to the core and maybe restart the magnetic field, and water to resupply the planet. with that missing water, and along with this, more gases are needed to thicken up the atmosphere itself. The amount it would require to actually pull this off would likely completely destroy the crust and actually cause the planet to once again enter a state of just being pure magma on the surface. You wouldn't even call it lava because it would just be exposed magma. If we could accomplish this to this capacity that we need, we couldn't even touch Mars for hundreds, if not thousands of years as it cools from these mass impacts. Not to mention, every impact is going to affect its revolution, and the last thing we would want is to hit this thing from one side a little too much, and then it just sort of gets nudged off of its revolution around the sun, and then it comes to visit us. We don't want that. So, of course, the idea of humanity will make it if people plant trees that they will never see the shade of. This could apply, and for some distant in the future population, it could be worth it, but that hardly solves the issue of Earth becoming toxic in the meantime. Past this, there's still going to be other problems we're going to have to solve in the soil itself, even if we want to bypass this and just build habitats, which is likely the better option. First, the dust on Mars will completely destroy your lungs. This isn't soft dust that exists on Earth because water has sort of rounded it out and, collisions and all this. Mars dust is like Luna dust. It's sharp and jagged and will absolutely shred your sac, like your alveolar sac. And along with this, well, your sacs, you have lots of alveolar sacs, not just one. But, I had to make the joke. But there is also something known as perchlorate salts. This is the stuff that is similar to what's used in rocket propellants. Along with this, it's known as an oxidant, which is bad for genomic stability and completely toxic to your thyroid. Basically, you are living in a giant chemical hazard. If all of this wasn't bad enough, as if almost cosmically hilarious, our own biology limits us from really enjoying the sunny Martian weather for any extended period of time, and it's due to our own immune systems. So let's just not hypothesize, but just let me set this up for you. You have a colonizing group of, say, 50 people, right? They get out to Mars, they're enjoying life, they get all the habitat set up, they start reproducing, and then you have other people coming in from Earth who also now are like, okay, well, we need new genetic information coming in, obviously. So they get there, they start reproducing, they start bringing issues from Earth as far as like diseases and maybe different smells, and they're not used to this area. So they start kind of also intermingling with the population. You would just have constant plagues breaking out because people who are at Mars, as we were about to discuss, are not going to be able to deal with it. But then you also have issues of, as generations continue passing and colonizing people keep showing up to kind of help create the genetic diversity necessary, the entire structure of the human head is eventually going to change. And if you know anything about the human head, it barely fits out of the birth canal now. In fact, actually, there's supposed to be some deformations that take place when that happens, and that's why your skull is not fused as you're born, so that essentially your head can be crushed without any long-term effects. Well, your head's going to get too big, even with that crushing, to actually make it out of the birth canal. So it's a whole issue, but the main one is just going to be the immune system. We are seeing this actually in first world countries now as an emerging problem, and it's the complete absence of parasites. That's right, it's just a prank, bro, but ironically, humanity has grown and evolved on this planet, and it has some terrible consequences for us. Of course, we wouldn't be around if we didn't have this place, so I guess just pick your poison on that one, but here's the issue. Parasites that exist within the ground soil of this planet have plagued us since forever. And what's worse is our bodies know these things exist, and we become reliant on them. These parasites are decidedly absent on Mars as far as we know. So as parasites enter your body, it's not like a bacteria or virus. In those immunological responses, the body will actively and aggressively manage the problem. When it comes to parasites, it's a little more hampered as far as a response. Let's say an amoeba or a helminth enters your body. It's larger than your immune cells, and engulfing them is likely not going to be effective or even possible. And so, 2 immune cells in particular are activated. There are more, but just for the sake of succinctness, I think is that a word? Probably. We'll just mention these two, eosinophils and neutrophils. Neutrophils are typically the first to mobilize on the parasitic menace and will engage in a process known as degranulation. They will actually sit on the surface of the parasite and release proteases, antimicrobial peptides, and ROS, which is a reactive oxygen species. This can actually eat through the exterior of the parasite, causing it to lyse, or just outright kill it, which lysing will actually kill it. Not really sure why I said that twice, but this can also produce an area that is somewhat sticky, which may slow the parasite, preventing it from escaping as antibodies show up to further immobilize it. And this is the best case scenario. Of course, the parasites won't just sit there because they also want to live too. Sometimes they can literally shed the outer linings of their body, completely escaping the neutrophils and then moving on. This is actually how the brain-eating amoeba can just out-juke your immune system as it moves further into your brain and almost becomes inaccessible for the immune system because these are immune-privileged sites because your body does not not want to destroy your brain. Remember, if you're, you know what? PSA for you. There is something going around right now. It starts as like a sinus thing. It kind of hurts the back of your throat a little bit. It never really moves into your chest. So it's an upper respiratory system, probably a virus. If you are going to rinse your sinuses out, which actually does help out with the amount of time that you are sick for, you have to use boiled water for 10 minutes or only use distilled water. Do not use tap water. You can absolutely get a brain-eating amoeba that way. Just don't do it. And then when invariably the summer comes around, lake water. Don't, jump in there and then just suck up a whole bunch of water into your nostrils if you can help it. And also, water sports. Don't do that. That's where it lives. Now, don't be afraid. Obviously, this is a very, very rare infection. Naegleria fowleri is the name of it, but absolutely terrifies me, like to the level of prions. Just, that's my own personal hang-up. That's the whole thing about being a microbiologist. You learn about everything that can take you out, and it's like, oh my god. Anyways, eosinophils are mobilized typically in an effort to take down larger parasites. As the antibodies coat the parasite to slow it, they will actually run into the parasite like a crash dummy. As they do, they dump toxins all over it, such as proteins designed to pierce membranes. They will also dump peroxidase and neurotoxins. This has the effect of weakening the surface of the parasite. They engage actively in chemical warfare as the attack doesn't go unnoticed by your body. Macrophages will then show up and attempt to help clean up the invader. The issue arises in this, however, much like the 380 walking barrage in Helldivers 2, this has the intended consequence of blowing up the Vox engines on Cyberstan, because I just dropped there last night. That was terrible, but it has the unintended consequence of blowing up your friends, and likely probably yourself. Given that this is an area of effect attack, your cells get caught up in this battle and will likely lyse due to the toxicity released, which, as you know, not great for your cells. Your immune system will keep up the attack concerning some parasites, but in other instances, over time, your body will just learn to tolerate the presence of it. The attack will be somewhat muted, as it's almost like it knows there's no way to get rid of it permanently. Think of like malaria in this instance. And to this end, there will always be a low-level skirmish taking place, but never systemic attacks, or usually not systemic attacks. Usually, there can, however, be from time to time a literal flare-up as your body responds. Now, to this end, there are also parasites that can literally calm your immune system by being there, and this is the one that I want to talk about. When these invade your body, such as the pig whipworm, they calm the immune system by increasing anti-inflammatory signals nearby. They can also reduce autoimmune inflation, which is very interesting, and this is the important part of all of this. When they invade your body, their presence literally calms the immune system. In first world countries, we cure parasites, but we are actually seeing a rapid rise in allergy complications. Sometimes this results in quite literally the death of the person due to these allergies. The immune system has become so overreactive to the environment because nothing is there to calm it down that doesn't exist within it. As a result, it appears from what we understand that we need parasites at least to a degree. Parasites are actually found everywhere. If you've ever dug in the soil, didn't clean your hands, you probably have been exposed to parasites if they got near your mouth. Maybe you ate a sandwich or something, or bit your fingernails, whatever. But when we discover that we've been infected with parasites, we take medications. Now, don't think I'm pro-parasite here. I'd way more preferred if we developed a synthetic version that doesn't plague us permanently, sort of like what we've done with vaccines. You don't have to take the wild type to reap the benefits of the immune system by exposing it to the disease. Sort of like cowpox, inoculating people against smallpox. However, if we are to go to Mars and not have a bunch of people dropping due to maybe a mold spore or something, or maybe the next wave of colonists showing up, we need to find a way to replicate this. If we can't, then we may have to administer literal parasites to colonists so that they don't drop just from anaphylactic shock. So pretty hilarious, isn't it? Parasites rob your body of nutrients, yet you need them, at least to some degree as well. This may be just a classification issue, really. I remember actually reading a few years back that we may need to reclassify what cancer actually is and isn't, because as it turns out, most people's bodies appear to have some form of tumors in them. It's just completely benign, and then trying to also figure out what's malignant. If everyone has benign tumors, then really that would be the norm, not the exception. So it really wouldn't make it, I feel like all that cancers are like, the reason the reclassification is cancer bad, cancer very bad, but benign tumors, if they exist in everyone, then that wouldn't really technically be cancerous. We'd have to call it something else. But this sort of pairs with what humanity has been doing for a while now, at least also with fevers. I know, dude, we're getting way out there with all this, but it's important. I don't know, maybe I'm just trying to tell you stuff. But anyways, we try to correct the problem thinking fever is a bad thing, yet it's a natural byproduct of a functional immune system. I'm going to take the stand I always do on this and say, let your fevers have at least a few days to work. Some people hit 99 degrees and immediately pop an anti-fever medication. And they will be my comments saying it's not necessary to have a fever or to let it run its course, because that one guy they heard of years ago had a fever of 106 and then died. Yeah, at a certain point, like any system, it gets outside of like a normal boundary, it becomes dangerous. But if you have a fever of like 101 or 102, dude, let it ride. Just be uncomfortable and cold and drink your electrolytes and just chug water. Our bodies do this for several reasons. A, it puts us down because we're tired. 2, it makes the environment inhospitable for the invading pathogen. And D, it causes the immune system to activate more aggressively. These are important processes. Now, if your fever starts going several days or starts getting into like the 104 range, you need to go seek help, and anti-fever medication should be taken. I usually let a fever run for about 2 days before I address it, although typically I don't have to. My body is doing what it needs to do for a fever to even be viable, and this is my body's response to something that it's fighting. You wouldn't take a pill that tricks your brain into thinking you're not thirsty when clearly you're dehydrated, right? You wouldn't download a car, would you? Anyways, so all of this presents like an insane amount of barriers to terraforming. It really is almost impossible with our current tech, which finally leads us to this species that is actually on the planet. The nematodes. Look, I won't sugarcoat it for you. This was dumb. From what I gather, this species is consuming the algae and then releasing oxygen as a byproduct. At least, that's what Birchinal says. I don't know what he bases that on. But we're just going to assume he's right. So, first, what? Second, bruh. Okay, so this species allegedly exists as an animal that sort of bridges the gap between plants and animals. It's clear their internal metabolism runs much like a plant's would, but they simply exist as a more mobilized form of plant. This isn't really all that far-fetched. I mean, we see it on Earth currently. There are single cells. Let's see. I believe it's phytoplankton. Let me look. I'm gonna double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's phytoplankton. I was in fact correct. It is phytoplankton that produces 50 to 80% of the oxygen on this planet that we breathe, and they engage in photosynthesis for their own metabolism. But you don't call phytoplankton, a plant. It's an animal, technically speaking. Anyways, so plants and microbes produce O2 as waste product. We breathe that in and then breathe out CO2 as our waste byproduct. Sunrise, sunset. However, what I find most bizarre is what happened to Mars in the first place then. This would indicate that Mars at some point did in fact have life. Of course, did life cease because this species ate everything else? Or maybe they were just producing oxygen? Or did this species simply get caught up in the extinction event that destroyed everything concerning its own atmosphere? It's clear they couldn't have realistically survived on absolutely nothing, and they need chemical energy. So choosing instead to consume plants, and within that, likely the sources of energy being glucose that the plant has, some of this species probably would have been frozen in the polar caps on this planet, and when we nuked them, it melted everything, and then the remaining species, was then freed from stasis. Every planet around us, I guess it's like going to be a hard sell, and this one's the hardest sell because if we ever try to terraform it, we got to get rid of these nematodes now, which we probably inadvertently created a population explosion. But also, even if we got to Mars and we corrected the atmosphere at some point, we are still going to have to worry about a solar flare literally ripping the atmosphere away of everything that we just created. And along with that, if we do not do it correctly and the right amount of just, chef's kiss, I guess. Like, let's say we cannot generate electrical storms because we just simply do not have a thick enough atmosphere and there's just not enough energy coming from the sun, then an ozone layer also would never form, blocking UV radiation. So it's clear for the foreseeable future, our best bet is to create actual just habitational zones, because the actual requirements associated with making a planet like Earth, that's going to be insanely difficult. Much easier to just clean up the place that we have in the interim and then look for other Earth-like worlds, which is going to also require FTL. So, yeah. It's going to be really difficult for humanity in the future if we don't figure this out. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. What are your opinions on terraforming? It seems insurmountable, at least for now. But who knows what sort of tech we could build as a species in the future. If you did enjoy, then please leave a like and a comment as it helps the video out there. Otherwise, you're a huge nerd. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Instagram, Roanoke Tales link, and Patreon in the description if you'd like to support the channel. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the astronaut tier, we have Kusith and Lipsy Genji. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the astrophysicist tier, we have Destination Myra and Webitron Supreme. Thank you guys as well. At the full-fledged scientist tier, we have Frank Shaft Crank, Some Big Nerd, Metric System, Invictus Echo, Official Texan, The Homeless Guy in the Street, Jason, and Gina Elaine. Thank you guys for your awesome support as well. And the rest of my patrons, I really do appreciate y'all's support. It goes a long way towards helping out, especially because you don't even have to. So you guys are just absolute ballers. So again, thank you. All right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and we'll see y'all in the next one.